Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Reanimated. It is episode 113. I am H.A. Conrad, here with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, what's up?
Not much. Apologies for the hiatus. Work got in the way, as it has often in August. So everybody else is on vacation, and I am not. That's how it goes. But today I'm really excited to be talking about the first two episodes of the mid-season in Season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead. And before we get to that, a couple of news tidbits. Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. Got a pretty good article from RogerEbert.com. As you know, they tend to do the highbrow criticism. And in this piece, they're kind of taking a look at a trope in modern television and comparing it with olden days in the form of the preacher man. And the reason I picked this up is because it refers to Outcast and our Reverend Anderson, which we talked about a lot in our last show, and also Preacher, which is a show that we haven't talked about, and I don't know that we will because I don't think there's zombies in it. There might be.
There are not.
I don't think
That
so.
I can remember anyway.
As long as they don't go off too far off book, there probably shouldn't be. Although the angel fights have some of that because they're impossible to
Right.
kill and pretty fun. And then so they take Reverend Anderson. They take what's his name from Preacher? I forget, Johnny Custer or something. And then Rust Cole from season 1 of True Detective. I'm not sure why they picked him because he's kind of as they say, all he does is spew nihilistic aphorisms. But they're talking about these guys as like the modern mystic in film, whereas in olden days that character was more of like a pillar of society and someone that kind of was a force for good, capital G. And nowadays they're more like a lost wanderer who is kind of thrown into what they're doing against their will. And true belief doesn't really is constantly in question. So it's just an interesting article from RogerEbert.com. So I would check that out in terms of just the way that TV, as we tend to pick up every 5-10 years, we've been definitely going through some stuff.
Right. Did you ever happen to see the show Carnival?
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's what came to mind when I was reading this article.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's some pretty big spoilery stuff about the preacher in that one, right?
right.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, it's kind of an interesting article. I definitely recommend it. I think it
hmm
brings up some good points and good themes considering what's going on in the real world at this time. A couple of other silly things. There was this video about how to make a weapon to survive the zombie apocalypse, and it's just really terrible and silly. But if you're bored, I say take a look at it. nothing, nothing much to see here, but still kind of silly and funny in any case.
You too could make that zombie survival
I
tool.
think anybody could, and you could probably improvise a little bit. But anyway, it was just kind of funny. NPR had a bit of a review of the South Korean movie Busan, which but also says that it's a bit of not a bit, a lot of a critique of Korean society. And it's a little bit disturbing if you put it in that context. But very interesting article sort of outlining some of the things that happens within the plot points of the movie and what that means about the commentary about
It's
Korean
yeah,
society.
it seems like it was one specific incident that kind of prompted the
The article.
film. Yeah, the film to follow the course that it did, which was the 300 mostly teenagers dying in a or being getting on a ferry and it capsized, and the crew took the lifeboats without taking on passengers.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of it's basically a angry pointing finger at society in terms of corporate greed, the establishment not following orders or not doing what they're supposed to do to save people, and the government kind of just being an absentee father in a way.
Well, not just that, but just being very secretive and quiet as well, I think. And what the motivation for that could be argued, I think. But in any case, kind of an interesting article. I think that it's worth the read. And lastly, what's been going on in the news the last couple weeks, which, obviously I'm not so I have never been a fan of clowns myself, but in South Carolina, Greenville, there's been a lot of reports of clowns in the woods that have been enticing young children to come into the woods with them by showing them cash and candy. When people go to investigate, they don't find anything, and I find it very strange that it doesn't seem like a lot of adults have seen said clowns, but it feels almost like well, I think if they are actually out there, I think that it's got to be some kind of a viral promotional thing, which has happened in other communities. But I have to say, this is an idea. People dressing up as scary clowns and wandering around. Just not. Why would you do that? But anyway. But it just, to me, feels like it's almost taken on some kind of hysteric quality where I think a lot of people who maybe even hadn't seen anything are saying that they have. It just feels a little bit like my BS meter is going off, but just was curious what you think about it.
Yeah, the cash and candy thing is
It
makes me
seems
think that it can't be marketing
really
because that seems over the top.
it seems so over the top though, and then it's like they kind I don't know. To me, it's like I hope it's just a marketing campaign, honestly, because that would be
Yeah.
ill-advised, but at least it wouldn't be as scary as if these were actual people trying to lure kids into the woods. So anyway, I suspect more is going to come out. I think it's a little bit suspicious that Rob Zombie has this film coming out shortly called 31, and it has a bit carnival workers and features scary clowns. And then Stephen King's there's a remake happening of that, and of course that features Pennywise. Don't know if you saw the makeup for him, but I still think the Tim Curry version is scarier, personally. But anyway, as I'm curious to see what happens. It's just to me, it just the reporting and also just any sort of evidence of what this is actually about is a little murky. And there's also been, to me, recently, there's been a lot of weird viral things that turn out to be, or weird things that have happened that turn out to be hoaxes. Most recently here in New York, there's this woman on one of the trains, and supposedly she was trying to sell crickets and worms on the train, and then somebody disturbed it, and she went crazy, and there's all sorts of hysteria on the train car, and it turned out later that she is some sort of performance artist that is protesting conditions of the homeless, and so she had actually other people that were involved in this stunt and videotaped it, and the footage of this is just so it's a little too good for somebody to have just taken it on the train, you know what I mean? And so I kind of feel like this is going to go that way, but to be continued. And it's just kind of interesting though if this turns out to be a marketing campaign, who thought that was a good idea? Just say. But on to what we are going to talk about today. The first two episodes of the mid-season split. So episodes, this is
8 and 9.
8 and 9, correct. So Grotesque and Los Muertos. And the first came out August 21st, the second August 28th. And so we're joining our group of survivors, our West Coast survivors, but they are kind of split up. So the first of these episodes deals exclusively with Nick. For those of you who don't remember, Nick got separated from his family, or chose to be separated from his family, after they burned down the community of the weird dead people who were celebrating the dead. And he's, been known to dress up as a zombie or as a walker and kind of walk with them, and that's sort of what he was doing the last time we saw him, and they were all very sad, especially Madison, that he decided to leave them. So we're jumping in after that point. So do you want to kick it off, Stuart?
Yeah, sure. So, my takeaway from the end of last half season 2A, was that he had lost his mind, because how could he think he's better off without the rest of his family? I guess, the show is taking a different tack on that, suggesting that he's been kind of by himself a lot anyway, and they definitely, through the flashbacks, they kind of hammer more into that concept throughout the course of this episode. But we get to meet Nick. Oh, wait, first of all, this is directed by Daniel Sackheim and written by Kate Barrow, and the audience for this one was 3.86 million. And we get to see Nick wandering around highways. Let me find my notes.
Yeah, he's wandering around. I mean, but first he's still kind of with one. I'm assuming it's one of the survivors from the other
Yeah,
community, and they're
it's like the head maid. She's the only other one who really speaks from the compound.
right. And she's it's Luciana. Is that her name?
I think that's the name of a character who shows up later.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm confused about which one it is.
I
But
don't know the
anyway,
sixth name, but she's the one who tells them to drop their weapons when they first got to the compound. She's like, you can either leave your weapons or you're gonna go back
okay.
out into the
So anyway,
streets.
she's like kind of taking off. She tells him he should go with them, and he's like, no. And the thing about Nick that I think is his ongoing theme. It's been his theme since we met him, is that he is a loner, and he finds some solace in certain people, but for the most part, he's just very lost, and he's very susceptible to being led by others or sort of certain strong characters. And we've seen that. It's interesting though that he has such a conflicted feeling about his mom, who seems to want to lead him, but I guess that's sort of typical in parental child relationships. But we see him. To me it seems like every other episode they run into people where he sort of attaches himself to the person who's the most powerful leader in the room. And so it's kind of interesting that he makes the decision here to just go off by himself. And I actually really liked this episode a lot because I thought that it showed just, it's kind of interesting that he's such a loner, and he seems to be so sick of real human company, but he is still such a survivor in general, and he does really, really stupid things all the time.
This
But
episode, especially.
this episode especially, but there's things here. And I think that we all, and they kind of hit us over the head a lot, or at least I feel they do, where it's like the living people let him down, the dead help him. And that to me seems to be the ongoing theme that we've seen with him here, that the living aren't to be trusted, but he gets along just so well with the walkers. But he's somebody that's not like an outdoorsman. He's definitely much more of an urban survivalist, or at least that's what we've seen up until this point. Like, he's very good at sort of working his way around whatever systems are in place, working his way around whatever humans or obstacles, but we've never really seen him in the wild, and I think that that's kind of the cool thing about this.
That's the yeah probably this is a decent episode for that reason. But I feel like this kid, he really should have watched or read Into the Wild by John Krakauer. Like that
Yes.
kid who went to Alaska and ended up dying. He basically has zero idea what he's doing. He has some decent initiative in some of the stuff that he does to try and survive, but like the first thing that he does wrong, clearly he's been given food and water and directions, sort of rough directions by the maid. But his first night alone, he goes into an empty house with big windows and big doors and he's on the ground floor and he lights a fire
Right.
and he has himself like a great meal and some water, but then he gets snuck up on by a tiny lady with a baseball bat who, oh my God, please tell me you couldn't just take that bat away from her and beat her with it. But he loses everything and he's bleeding and he's now he's in such worse position.
I
It's
just
just
kept
crazy.
thinking this is Nick's very no good, rotten, terrible day, whatever that
Yeah, that's what I
is.
called this episode too. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and it's sort of like not that he deserves it, but it seems like
Well,
he
he
should
does
know
for
a little.
lighting a fire.
No, I'm just saying like he should know better, and he does know better. So again, this is one of the yet another example of what I feel the writers are doing in a very artificial way with a character who seems to be really great at surviving everything, and then makes these dumb decisions that I know he knows better than doing. And it
Yeah.
really troubles me because it's just such inconsistent character building. So that really bothered me a lot.
And,
And
and the show has gone into the concept of the people who survive by themselves in the apocalypse. Bob being like his famous predecessor from the Prime show, you know, played by William Gilliard or I forget what his first name is. Lawrence Gilliard Jr. You know what I'm talking about, right,
Yeah.
AJ? Yeah. Okay. So we've had scenes of Bob like surviving by himself, and he basically just has to drink himself into a stupor every night to sleep. But yeah, somehow Nick is having this other experience. Although it's like this is his learning curve, this whole episode.
Yeah, I guess so, but I still feel like he already knew some of these lessons before heading out there, so some of this to me was just so contrived and annoying, but whatever. Then he's all like wandering down the highway,
Yep.
and this is smart, to some extent, because he's going to go through some survivor cars because he has no supplies at this point. But okay, so this is the point in this episode. Just I'm like, really, come on, man. Like he comes across a car with a walker in it, somebody who's turned, and he's like drinking water from that person's stuff. Clearly, water that had been consumed already by this person who has turned. And I'm just kind of like, dude, really? Like, I know you're desperate for water, but nobody knows exactly what's going on with this. And I know you're spreading all the guts all over yourself and stuff, but this is a different matter entirely. I don't know. Like, it's a virus or something like that. I don't, it just really bothered me that he did this. And maybe this is his not fearing death or maybe even inviting death. Maybe he's doing it deliberately, but it truly just irked me.
I didn't have that reaction. To me, it's just in survival, you'll drink mud water, you'll drink whatever you have to.
But then again, and then we see him with the weird transistor radio, and we see his first encounter with bad humans.
The radio is kind of an interesting plot point because he's like, oh, this could be handy. It's not really, it could be, I guess, somewhat informational. It's a one-way radio. It's only going to be, it's only going to be receiving transmissions. But then it almost immediately betrays him, and so he has to run away from it when it squeals, and the dudes chase him. Not 100% clear on why these dudes are
okay, so yeah,
doing what they're doing.
This is another thing. So these three dudes, they come up. They have a lot of weapons. They do stuff like they kill this old man survivor in the car, who's clearly weak and probably needs water, and they just kill him cold-bloodedly. So of course Nick knows they're bad news.
Well,
but why?
That one I almost understood. Like that guy's a liability. If for like a bunch of cold-blooded survivors, you would kill that guy.
Maybe, but they just seem to kind of be nonchalantly going, and I'm not really seeing. I guess they were trying to do the same thing that Nick was, scavenging for supplies, but it doesn't seem like they're doing a lot. Mostly, what it seems they're doing is joking with each other and being all macho, and then they chase Nick. And I also feel like, why would they chase him? Why are they going to waste energy chasing him once he's scared off? Once he's scared off from what they're trying to get, why chase him? And they wasted a lot of bullets on him. And I just feel like people in this situation are not going to do that. At least they did have Nick running not in a straight line for the most part. But still, it was kind of weird. And he ends up in this field and falls asleep there eventually after unsuccessfully eating cactus and puking.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember the exact order of these things, but yeah, he ends up in like the desert with a capital D, and then tries to eat a cactus, doesn't work out, but he tries some interesting techniques. Like first he tries to just like he uses his shirt to break it up, and then he mushes it into a paste. He still throws up, but then he drinks his pee almost right away, right?
Right.
And he seems to like it.
I know, that was the weird creepy part, but anyway.
Okay.
Maybe he's just so desperate at that point. But I know he's exhausted at this point, but he falls asleep next to a car in an open area. Like, the car's right there. Go on top of the car or in the car.
No kidding. Yep.
Something. Like, what are you doing?
Well, he's making the same exact mistake he made with the big house. Like, that house was a bungalow. Like, you could have gone on the roof of that house, and you could have had your fire, although you would have probably ended up surrounded by zombies.
Right, but still, it's like, so he's already, to me, it's just like, hey, your learning curve, you're having a tough time here, bud. And then, he suddenly wakes up just before the dogs are going to attack. Like, I don't know. So two wild dogs, or I don't even know what kind of dogs. I mean, they look pretty purebred to me, but...
They're German Shepherds, aren't they?
And they go after them, and then, once again, his undead friends rescue him by just wandering into the field. And I don't feel like these dogs would have attacked the walkers, because I feel like they know what's what, or at least what we've seen in other examples in The Walking Dead.
That wildlife knows the score.
Wildlife doesn't go near these things, or they run from it if they can get away. They often don't get away, but I don't know that they're gonna like go after them unless they're protecting somebody. But maybe they're just so hungry they don't even care at this point. But the walkers consume the dogs, and then comes the next piece that I'm just like, ugh, come on. Anyway, so
What's
Nick's
the next piece? Where Nick gets on the roof and
Nick's hiding on the roof, and they hear a little bit of him, and I think obviously they smell like the blood where the dogs have bitten him.
yeah.
And they get called off by some gunshots and things like that from a distance. And then he gets down and starts eating one of the dogs.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't like that part?
Well, again, the walkers have been eating it, and
Yeah.
you just don't know what would make you infected. And so I just feel like this is, again, something weird. And he really does have no fear of the undead, though. And then this piece where this walker kind of realizes is trying to get him, and he like grabs the belt off and manages to tourniquet his leg a little bit and cover up the smell of himself.
This is what I don't understand. Why he would give himself a tourniquet? You can't tourniquet yourself for like a day and a half.
No.
You'll lose your leg, guaranteed.
I think he was more trying to cover the smell of the bite. That's kind of what I thought, as opposed to trying to staunch blood flow. Because the bite wasn't like insane. I mean, it was not good, but I don't think it was like bleeding uncontrollably. And then he does his whole little camouflage trick, and he's all hallucinating. And I mean, I will tell you that Frank Delane does a fantastic job as an actor here, just walking like the undead. He really does look like a walker. Mm-hmm. That symmetry there is really kind of amazing, and he's hallucinating, and we get these little flashbacks of his life.
Yeah.
That are kind of informing stuff, like the fact that his dad died in a car accident while he was in rehab. His dad's like an absentee dad, so he has a lot of resentment toward his parents. And then we see a little bit more of the first walker that we saw in this whole entire series, which was his weird little rehab friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's. What did you think about those little interactions where they showed her?
I'm not a huge fan of these flashbacks. I feel like I already know enough about Nick's motivation, except for why he's a junkie or whatever. Who cares? I mean, at some point, I'm not that interested. I'd rather. I was way more interested in the parts of the show that were about him trying to survive in the desert, which is a very challenging survival experience. Even though they did some questionable stuff like the tourniquet on the leg. But yeah, I wasn't super into the idea of learning more about the way he bounced in and out of rehab. And they took us right up to what I can assume is the night before the zombie apocalypse, essentially, like when they shoot up one last time.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of hoping what these flashbacks would show was a little bit more of why he and Madison had such a conflicted relationship, and maybe there was more to his drug addiction than we were aware. It didn't do that. I agree with you that it didn't really show that, and I thought that they were just basically trying to show a little bit more of his character evolving here, but I don't know that they needed quite so many of these.
I didn't learn anything particularly interesting other than now in the next episode we're talking about, they also refer to the dad and his death. So right. I don't know if they're trying to make this into some sort of. It's weird. Like, yeah, now that Travis is gone, they're going to start talking about the dad, just because Travis is gone for one episode. I don't know. It's kind of dumb. So I did not really enjoy the flashbacks, but fine if they have to talk about the dad, or maybe they're going to have him show up, or I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. But, once again, he's shuffling in with, like, a horde, like a little crowd
a mini horde. Yeah,
a mini horde. And he's observed, I mean, he's not doing so well. He hasn't had a lot of water. He has this dog bite. And then he's observed by Luciana. and her group of survivors. And clearly they're doing a little bit of the same thing. They've got the camouflage. You can tell that they're wearing walker blood, though not quite as dramatically as Nick is,
Yeah.
which makes me wonder like how that's even helpful. They both each have like kind of like a little smudge each on each cheek and on their like foreheads, but not what Nick looks like he's like washed in it. And they say a couple weird things like, oh, he's walking with them, and oh, and they're like, oh, take him out of his misery or whatever, and then they just kind of leave him alone. And he gets miraculously bathed in a rain shower, which revives him.
Oh, right, because he starts. But he also got revenge on the banditos with his group of zombies, right?
He
Before
does, but
before they ran
again,
into Lucy and Francisco, they're just wandering towards the guys in the Jeep, and
right.
there's like a really slow game of chicken that happens where
But do you believe this at all? Because I don't.
what that the guy would stay there to try and load his pistol.
That any of these guys would stay there and try to shoot if they see the guys coming. They know that they're dangerous. They're coming. They're not going to stop. They've had their fun. They've taken out a few of them. They have a car. They
Yeah,
have
I
a
know.
Jeep. Like
One of them
what?
gets a
I don't know. Just seems really dumb. But in any case, two of the banditos get eaten by the horde, and Nick seems almost like he's going to join in with them and then doesn't.
the writers were trying to make this point of symmetry, where alone Nick had to run away, and now that he's with his new quote unquote friends, he can roll right over the banditos. Right?
Right.
Like what you were saying, like the dead are his best friends, whatever.
But so anyway, he revives and then wanders in, still limping a little bit like a walker into Tijuana.
Right.
And then there's an interesting thing because there's like dogs, but they don't seem like the wild dogs or the crazy dogs that he met in the wild. And he eventually gets greeted by the survivors and wakes up, or ends up not wakes up, but he's like trying to treat himself with duct tape, which is the magic cure all of everything.
Yeah. And she's like, that's not gonna fix it. I'm like, I think it
I don't
will.
know, it might, but I think she more meant the infection because
Yeah.
clearly he's got like some infected dog bite at this point.
Yeah.
And hopefully those dogs had their shots for distemper and rabies and everything.
Hopefully he doesn't get lockjaw. Yeah, that would
And
suck.
that, yeah, after all this, and he gets brought into what is it looks like a medical clinic, and he gets treated by possibly a doctor. We don't know too much yet about that guy. And it's a little bit like he's been through hell and he ends up in like what is not just a community of survivors, but it's a real community. Like there's food sales, or at least it seems very like it's kind of interesting. It seems it's the same feeling as Celia's compound to some extent that they were at before.
hmm
A little bit more urban though, but there's children playing soccer. There's vendors. There looks like this a market. I don't know what they're trading in. Probably just goods, but he seems like he's kind of made it. But he's given a stern talking to about his behavior. That basically it's fine not to be scared of the dead, but you shouldn't be seeking death, I think was the point.
I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% clear on the motivation for these people, and it doesn't really help. The next episode they talk about it more, but it's still not totally clear for me. But yeah, so we get into the compound, and he starts playing soccer immediately with some kids because that's kind of Nick's thing, is he's drawn to the children, right?
Yep.
He does
He
great
seems to
with
trust the
kids.
children more than adults, and that's fine. Although, again, he's very much drawn to strong adult characters like Celia, and especially if they're strong characters that are giving him some way of making sense of this world, or are giving him almost like a set of rules with which to deal with this world. So that's I but it's just it's not totally consistent, at least. So
What are your main takeaways then from the 2B opener?
I mean,
Did you enjoy it?
I actually really enjoyed it. I obviously there's pieces that I've complained about within this that I think are ridiculous and don't make sense. And I think that that's one of my biggest issues with Fear the Walking Dead is the inconsistency. It is just, to me, it's very spotty overall as a series, especially with the consistency of the characters. And to me, Nick is, I think there would be other better examples you could use of Nick trying to survive rather than the ones that they've shown, but fine, if that's the way they're going. Alejandro is the name of the doctor guy. Sorry, wasn't
Alejandro.
coming to me.
He was a recurring character on Boardwalk Empire too.
Yeah, no, I like that actor. I think he's great, but again, he's already been taken to task by Alejandro and seems to listen to him a little bit anyway. Who, like, Alejandro's like fixing up his leg and being all like, hey, it's great that you're doing this and that you're like whatever, that you're surviving, but you have to be smart about it and all this other stuff. So there you have it. But overall, I liked it. I liked there was not a ton of talking in this episode. So it was very much Nick's journey, and I like the idea of Nick's character evolving. I just wish that the evolution had been a little different.
And I'm not sure that he's evolved based on this. It's not clear to me if he's learned that like it's better to have people with you, or if he's going to try and go off by himself again. Because, frankly, that's not really clear.
No, he seems to have challenges with that. But I think that that's a nice jumping off point to get into the next episode.
And in the next, may I?
Go for it.
So, directed by Deborah Chow and written by Alan Page, came out to an audience of 3.6 million. This is Los Muertos. And we jump right back in with Nick waking up in the pharmacy, or what we learn is a pharmacy building, because it says that on the door actually after he walks out. And there's a woman who seems to have tuberculosis or maybe lung cancer who's coughing up a lot of blood next to him. And it seems a little grim. Like, it's a very different vibe from when he walked out the last time, like when it was very bustling. This is like one dying lady, and then he walks outside and it's deserted and there's just like blowing tumbleweeds. And the episode kind of continues in that vein a little bit, where he walks to try and find anybody. We see some people in the background as he's walking, like on the guard towers, but there's clearly like, where is everybody gone? And then he finds them, and they're all doing the thing that we saw in the trailer, which was sacrificing one of their people, while the guy's daughter is watching, and that's who Nick walks up on. And that girl has a very good crying face.
She does have a good crying face. And, again, this reminds me a lot of Celia's Compound, where, like, is it a religious ritual? Is it because the guy did something? You don't really know what's going on, but it does feel very religious. I was also reminded of the book The Lottery, or the story The Lottery, if you've ever read it, where the townspeople, it's just like this, seems like a happy community, and they're all talking about this thing that they do. And in fact, they stone one of their community members that they choose by lottery every year for a good harvest. Like, this is the sort of tones that this evoked for me.
Hunger Games.
Pardon?
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games is definitely along the lottery lines and that kind of thing. And, you've got all the people that we've seen that have seemed somewhat normal, or at least somewhat positive up until this point, chanting right along with everybody else as this guy just gets torn to pieces. So we still don't know exactly why they're doing this. It just seems to me, it seems really weird that they're doing this, but okay.
Well,
and then
this is explained later in the episode, but it makes even less sense when
they explain it.
Lucy explains it to me, or to the audience. But go on. What's Nick is trying to like calm the girl down, and she's like pushing him away.
Yeah, because it's like, how do you calm down from that?
And who are you?
Right, you weird dude.
Strange man. What are you doing?
I don't want to cuddle.
I thought that was a good reaction on the girl's part. She's like, get off.
Yep.
But yeah, so very strange. And then we go basically from that to, well, my notes on this episode are a little sketchy. So there's some more town stuff where people are yelling at him to make himself useful because he's just wandering around, kind of like being Nick. But then we also jump to Maddie, and we get to see the rest of the cast, or some of them anyway. We still haven't seen Chris and Travis, and that's basically okay.
I'm okay with that.
I want to see what Travis is up to. Maybe he's left Nick. That'd be cool. Or sorry, Chris. So yeah, Maddie. This episode is bad for Maddie, and I'm
and Strand.
And it's eventually bad for Strand too. Actually, the only person who comes out of this episode looking good is Alicia
Yeah,
somehow, which I did not
totally.
expect.
Me neither. And, basically, Alicia, Maddie, Strand, and Ophelia are, we see this jumps in where they've like left the community and they discover that their boat's missing. They leave like a message. Maddie's still like, oh, Travis could come back. And Alicia's just like, nobody's coming back. Like,
Oh, I
get
think
it.
they're talking about Nick.
Oh, they're talking about Nick, sorry. But
Yeah.
either way, it's interesting. Alicia's the one kind of pulling it together. And so they leave a message and kind of drive on, and they go back to the resort. I think that they passed this earlier in the either the first season, at the end of the first season, or early in the second season.
Well, on the boat?
I thought that they had.
I don't recall.
But in any case, they go to this resort, and they're kind of hesitant about going in because it could be crawling with walkers, but they need supplies.
Well, yeah, and shelter. I mean, the thing is, Ophelia is already talking about walking into the water as soon as they find that the
Yep.
Abigail's gone. And Maddie is like being really weird and distant and saying like he always comes back.
Yep.
And Alicia's like, he's gone. It's just you and me. Let's focus. And Maddie's like, no, I'm just gonna look off into the horizon. I feel like okay, maybe there's some consistency here with her character, but she was like a logical, rational person last season or last 2A, and I'm disappointed to
That
see
they've
them
gone
just
this way, yeah.
to be like, oh, even though she got into the pickup truck and drove away from Nick at the end of 2A, right? So it would a person who is willing to get into a truck and drive away from their child then now have this weird break from reality where she needs to look for him at the expense of her surviving child.
Right. Well, maybe she's in shock or whatever. But again, I think this points to the inconsistency in what they do with the characters and why I find this show so infuriating. And I'll be honest with you, the minute they start to do this, which was pretty much at the beginning of the episode, I was just like, oh my God, really? You're doing this again? Because a lot of what we saw, even with Maddie, like in the first season and then in the first half of the second season, was this person that could make decisions and was having to be very, not businesslike, but matter of fact about the reality of what the new world meant. And she seems to get there a lot more quickly than other characters that, are being a little bit less focused on survival and more on what sort of the rules of the world before and sentimentality and things like that. And she hadn't been doing that, and now she's suddenly lost. It just totally drives me crazy.
Yeah, so that's frustrating, and then they make bad decision after bad decision in the hotel. First of all, the hotel seems like not a great place to go. I get
Well,
that
it
it's
doesn't
like,
also doesn't seem like a great place to split up, right?
and
And
she tries not to let that happen, but she's doing it the wrong way. She should just be like, I'll go with you. When
right.
Alicia wants to go up to the tower, they should all just go together. Because what are they doing otherwise? They're sitting in a bar.
Right. And they're doing stuff that, again, Strand and Maddie know better than what they are doing here. And you know what? You know what you shouldn't do? And this is like similar to the Daryl and Beth drinking thing and how stupid that was. And
Yeah.
it's just like you don't get drunk and inebriated, or if one of you wants to get drunk and inebriated, somebody needs to stay sober. Like you both can't be vulnerable like this. And they're in this bar with like, that is vulnerable on all sides. There's like glass everywhere. It's not protected. And they decide to get wasted together, and it just seems so stupid. And then at least Ophelia and Alicia are somewhat cautious, but even what they're doing is super dangerous because you don't know like how many people or how many walkers are infected could be there. You don't know where the exits are, and there isn't really an escape plan. Like at any moment, this could turn very bad.
Is it
And
Ophelia who says, I hate hotels, they're super creepy? I think it's the lights,
yeah, or the carpets, the carpets.
the carpet. It's they're in these like they're in a shining environment, like long narrow hallways. Hey, if there's zombies in front of you and behind you, you're done.
You're done.
Right?
So again, this just seems really stupid to me, and just to me, it just seemed a contrived place, like a setting for them to get into stupid situations, like exactly what happens. But whatever. But let's talk about what happens. So we've got things that we've seen with Ophelia and Alicia where they're walking down the hall and somebody has marked all the doors basically with like don't disturb signs for those doors that have infected behind them, which pretty clever. And then they come upon a room that doesn't have that sign, and there's an infected in there, but he's hung himself. So, not a threat, but still.
But it kicks off more of the conversation about suicide, which Ophelia seems to be obsessed with.
Right.
And Alicia's like, wow, there's nothing, I would have to try so many things before I would kill myself. And Ophelia's like, well, maybe he just got tired of waiting, or I forget what she said exactly, but it was something a little too much like, hey, I could go for some suicide right about now.
Well, and what I find annoying about this whole trend, and I guess it would be usual to have these themes that probably a lot of people who are in this situation are going to have these conversations, but it reminded me a lot of The Walking Dead in season 1, and with Andrea and Jackie and all those folks talking about these exact same themes, and I just feel like we're retreading ground. Not that you wouldn't have these conversations, but even the way they were talking about it was very just, okay, we're going here again.
I'm okay with them retreading this ground because this is a very real scenario
Agreed.
for this kind of apocalypse. It's just, I don't know. I guess I just don't want them to belabor the point. If Ophelia is going to throw herself off a balcony, just do it. I don't want to like drag it out for a whole episode.
And let's not have rescue attempt after rescue attempt of Ophelia. It is quite interesting that her name's Ophelia, though.
But
That's
she's
kind
not
of
insane.
Consistent with that character.
Yeah.
But then you also have Strand and Maddie, and they're getting cozy, getting to know each other. They're bonding. We do find out, interestingly enough, that Maddie is from the South. I wonder if they're going to link that up at some point, but we'll see.
Oh, what did she? No, she was from Texas, right?
No. But I thought she said she lived in either Alabama or Atlanta. But either way, I thought maybe they were going to do something there. Hopefully they won't, because I think that'd be kind of silly.
She's like Rick's sister.
Yeah, if she turns out to be Rick's sister, give me a break. But anyway, so they're talking, and Strand's talking about, they're talking about similar things, interestingly enough, but in a different context. Like Strand enjoyed the game. He enjoyed the things that the world portrayed. And now he's kind of he's like a little bit rudderless because he doesn't really have that game. What was motivating him and what he enjoyed, the thrills that he got from his little Confidence Man game are no longer around. Like those constructs are gone. New constructs, so maybe he'll find his joy in scamming people again. but they're not there. And I mean, both of them are a little bereft and sad. And Maddie says a lot of weird stuff like about, Nick and his drug addiction and being a mother. And she says something very telling, which is that she did it even though like she knew better than history told her. So, you wonder if there's like a history of mental illness or addiction in her family. And then she confesses that her dead husband probably committed suicide. At least that's what it sounded like to me, instead of what she told Nick and Alicia, which is that it was a car accident. But it sounds like he might have deliberately driven into oncoming traffic. So, but then can you talk about this next piece, which is the most infuriating thing I think I've ever seen?
We're still at the hotel.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So they drink a whole bottle of tequila, or maybe more than one. And Strand starts to play the piano really badly, and she starts to just throw glasses while they yell at each other.
In an open bar area that's like surrounded by other rooms and other things. Like,
and
come on, guys.
Everything, this whole area, which was kind of quiet and mostly zombie free, is now suddenly swarming with them. And it's kind of a very foregone conclusion. Also, Alicia gets out of the shower because there's still hot water and water pressure on whatever floor of the hotel they're on, and she finds that Ophelia is gone. And then she looks out on the balcony. This is actually kind of cool imagery, at least, is all the zombies coming out to their balconies from their hotel rooms and throwing themselves off the edge.
Yeah.
As they're trying to get to the source of the music, which I thought was kind of fun.
That was kind of fun. I also thought that this was clearly a little bit of a meta reference to Shaun of the Dead, where they're in the bar surrounded by the zombies.
It feels a little bit like that, but it also feels like, oh God, what's that video game with the amazing intro movie, Dead Island?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely.
Where the family goes over the balcony and it's all played in back in reverse. I felt a little bit of that too, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and I feel like they're doing their little meta reference chops here. So yeah, you got that going on. And that was kind of fun. And then you know, but that's pretty much all I have to say about like they're left in pretty dire straits here at the hotel.
yeah.
But in Nick
And they're
World,
hammered. I mean, they
yeah,
are
they're hammered. They're
falling
hammered.
down drunk, and then they kind of have to switch to fighting mode,
Survival.
and all they
And they're
manage
not
to do
doing
is
it very well because they're
no,
drunk, and
yeah,
they have like a bottle. One bottle is not going to help you. So we'll have to see what happens with them. And then the only one who's in, and she's not even in total safety, but Alicia with Ophelia MIA. Ophelia might be over the balcony. We don't know. But Alicia is like back in this room, just kind of because she tried to get out and go down and help them, and got thwarted because there's a ton of walkers everywhere, as we
in the
just discussed.
stairwell. Yeah.
But she's just kind of like hanging out, and we'll have to come back to this hotel group. I'm sure they will in the next episode, or perhaps they won't.
Basically, they're setting themselves up to have to be rescued by someone, and so
Yeah,
we can speculate that it might be Travis and Chris, or it
maybe,
might be Banditos, and they're gonna end up in some sort of weird like prisoner exchange with Nick's colony.
maybe
We'll see. We'll see.
we'll see
But
what
yeah,
happens.
they're essentially unable to extricate themselves at this
No,
point, unless Alicia goes full on Schwarzenegger and saves the day, which I doubt.
right? Or maybe she's just the only
Ophelia.
survivor. Maybe yeah. Maybe Ophelia and Alicia are the only survivors out of this wonderful little lot. We'll see.
Oh
I
my
doubt
God.
that, given so the prominence of Strand and Madison, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And then Nick,
Also, there's just one more point on
sorry.
Ophelia. Like the show does not enjoy doing off-screen deaths, so the
Mm-hmm.
odds that Ophelia is actually dead, I think, are low. I think.
Agreed. I think it's gonna be a to be continued thing with her.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, you were saying Nick. Nick and Lucy go off on a road trip.
There's some things about this whole arrangement that I find confusing or don't make complete sense to me.
Hit me.
So the reason why Lucy and Nick go off is because they're trying to go and get water for this community. They've run out of water. First of all, water is definitely, absolutely, without question, one of the most important things for survival for humans. And we go through a lot of it. The recommendation when hurricanes or other natural disasters happen is to have at least like a gallon per
One
person per
one
day.
gallon per person per day. Yeah.
So if you think about the number of people we have seen in this community, I think it looks to me like there's probably about 70 or 80, maybe,
Yeah.
right? So think about how much water that is, okay? So then they go off and they're going through these little areas of Tijuana. They're not seeing any walkers anywhere. Tijuana's a pretty big city.
Yep.
Unless they have cleared this entire city, which I don't find plausible, but whatever. They're going off, and let's just say they know a safe path, and maybe they're not running into walkers. And they end up at this sort of shopping center area, and Lucy basically explains to Nick that these are the people that they get the water from and whatever, and she procures a bag, and not to look at them wrong, that formerly, in their former lives, they were drug dealers, but now they're dealers of everything.
They're still kind of drug dealer looking. They're still wearing like gold chains. They
They have
don't look like
weapons.
they don't look like zombie survivors. They look just like people
They,
you would expect to be drug dealers right in this world,
right.
but just transplanted to the zombie world.
Right, and they're very clean. They're very like nonchalant about the whole deal.
Like they're well
And
fed. They're kind of plump, and
right.
I don't know. It's just funny.
So then Lucy procures this bag of pharmaceuticals, which is funny because that's what she's giving these drug dealers to get their supplies, and is told she can fill up like one cart of like a shopping cart. And she's like, oh, it used to be two. And they're like, well, now it's one. And so times are changing. And so they go in, her and Nick go in, and it's basically like this sort of like supply depot where there's food, there's water, whatever, and they're only allowed to fill up one cart. It's like a zombie apocalypse version of supermarket sweepstakes. And Nick sees the main drug dealer guy, like, kind of comforting another survivor. There's like a weird tent city set up in there. And I don't know. I find it weird that these people who have control of all of these supplies don't have any drugs anywhere, because they were drug dealers. Right?
Yeah.
And the woman looks like she's going through some kind of withdrawal. Nick looks like he's familiar with it, even in the recognition of it. And Nick tries, to get Lucy to do take a cake or a candy or something. And she's like, no, only what we need. And the amount of water that they're putting on this cart is not enough for the group that they have to go back to. Also, if he really wanted the candy, it would have fit in that cart easily. Anywhere. In a crevice, whatever. Right?
Yeah, it would have fit very easily.
And it would not have taken away from any of the water that they're trying to get. So anyway.
No. Yeah.
And the reason why I'm focusing on this candy is that, of course, when they leave, Nick has tried to take the candy because Lucy wouldn't let him put it in the cart and gets tackled by the drug dealers. And they're going to cut off his hand with a machete. But quickly on his feet, he says to them, he's figured out that the woman that's going through withdrawal, how he figured this out, I don't know, is the main dude's sister. And that he's basically saying, we're not going to bring back any more OxyContin. This is the only stuff left. Dumb thing to say. And, now you have to give us 2 carts. And miraculously it works. And now they have 2 carts of supplies.
Yeah.
But first of all, I have a hard time believing that this group of drug dealers don't have access to any of these drugs. I just find that totally implausible. Secondly, if Lucy has actually been coming, or this community has been coming to trade with them, there is no way that this group of guys, based upon what we have seen, wouldn't be following them and taking over their little compound to get all their resources. And it seems as if they're much more equipped to do that because they have a lot, or at least what we have seen, they have a lot more weapons and able-bodied men. Because it seems like the survivors in the compound that Nick is at, a lot of kids, a lot of older people, a lot of injured people, not really a ton of people that are equipped to defend, from what I can see. And they describe their wall of survival, or their as the walkers that are protecting them. But I just still feel like this force that we've seen with the drug dealers would totally take this over. So this whole thing just seems based upon a lot of really tenuous plot points. And I still think it's somewhat ridiculous.
Personally, I think that Lucy would have left Nick there to have his hands cut off and
that
hung.
Too.
Because she doesn't know him from Adam, and she only took him because she thinks he's, not going to be a liability. But then he actually is. Because if he actually took that cake with the idea of getting caught and making that deal, he is completely a liability. And as she explains to him on the way home, she's like, they never knew where our colony was before. Now they do, or now they are interested, and you have screwed us all over. I feel like having to make that statement is just like, you are a complete waste of space and you're banned. But
yeah, I don't think she'd bring him back with her.
Right.
Even if he had survived all of that, I just don't think she'd be bringing him back in.
Or she needs him to carry the water, but then kick him out.
No, but after that, I just don't see that happening. And also throughout this wonderful little adventure that they go on, we hear a little bit more about what the colony is about and what's going on with the sacrifice of the colony members. So basically, there's colony members that have been bitten, and that was the case with the guy that we saw in the beginning. Like, he had been bitten, and they're pushing him through, and they have some thought that if he doesn't get torn apart or if he survives, that he is one of the people that are meant to inherit the earth. And they all kind of believe that they are.
Was it clear that he'd been bitten? I couldn't tell.
It wasn't clear. She said that he was, but we never saw that.
Oh, okay.
And, I think there's a little bit of the whole Celia religious thing going on here. And, maybe I don't necessarily think that's wrong in that you people try to make sense of the world they're in, and this seems to be the way they're trying to make sense of being among the walkers. And they've turned it into a very religious themed community, and this is a little bit, their faith is how they're surviving, that they think that they are inheriting the earth, that this is end of times, and you can see why people might think that. But the biggest thing, I think, or the biggest reveal, is that Alejandro, who is the doctor character, hang on one second, there's a
Oh yeah,
something going by. I don't even know what that is.
that was a helicopter.
Oh, I can't see it, but I could hear it. Anyway, the biggest reveal, I think, though, in this whole mythology or this whole sort of storyline is that Lucy tells Nick, because Nick's basically like, you're crazy. Nobody comes back from getting a bite. Nobody comes back from being infected. And she reveals that Alejandro, in fact, has. And he's like, oh, why can you believe that? You need proof. And she's like, well, I've seen it.
Or wasn't she there when it happened?
Yeah, she said she was there. And so Nick has found yet another
person to idolize.
Yeah.
We do get to see the big chomp marks in his shoulder too.
We do,
because conveniently his shirt hangs open when he's handing Nick something later in the episode. And then they have a weird church type scene where they're chanting their chant, which is from death we come and to death we deliver ourselves, which I've got to say, not really into that chant.
Not into it. And
the implications being that you're all going to eventually deliver yourselves to death. So not into that.
Doesn't seem like a community I'd want to be in.
let's find more of an Alexandria type thing where it's like, we will kill anybody who tries to mess with us. I think that's the chant that Rick,
I think that should be
Screw
the chant.
has. Yeah. So that's kind of where they leave off. Oh man. So yeah, I think we're definitely going to see some more fallout from Nick's stupid actions. That is very telegraphed. Yeah, you're right. They're probably going to come and take over the colony. To steal the rest of the Oxy, and Nick's dumb move will have killed off a lot of people. Another thing he finds out in his discussion with Alejandro at the end of the episode is that this colony might already be doomed. Clearly, they're out of water, they're out of medicine, or they've been shooting people up with saline solution instead of medicine. So they're probably not going to have. They don't have long either way.
Their timeline is going.
So yeah, you know what? The gangsters coming and attacking the colony, whatever. I guess it's kind of like same moot point. But it'll be interesting to see what washes out in that. Like it'll be Nick and Lucy, and will Alejandro survive? Maybe, maybe not. And it seems like that might be who gets out of this. Just to speculate based on TV tropes. Indeed,
but maybe Nick is just sort of like the the symbol of death for all of these colonies. Like any colony he walks into just gets totally destroyed.
Yeah.
It sort of seems like that might be the case, or that's the way it's going, at least Certainly. At this pace.
Yeah. And what do you think about the Abigail? Strand says that the military came and took it, but I actually also was thinking maybe it was Chris and Travis.
Maybe it was them. I was also thinking maybe it was that, our little intrepid survivor from the flight.
What's her name? Alex.
That would be kind of cool. Maybe it's her and her band of merry men.
That would be funny.
Since they're some of the only people that we know. And it was like that little, we saw the little boat. I don't know. Just a thought.
Well, the little dinghy, the Zodiac, was how they got from the Abigail to the shore.
But I just think, maybe it's something like that. But who knows? It could be Travis and Chris, but I would much rather it be like Alex. So.
We might not see the Abigail again. And if not, oh well. Honestly, when they were on that boat, it was always like, we're such a target. And so I'm kind of glad not to have to listen to that anymore.
Yeah, and it also felt a little like Gilligan's Island. Just get off the boat. I don't know. Get off the island. So we'll see. And so do you want to continue on with the second half of this season?
Yeah, let's keep hitting it. We might only have one episode at a time going forward. We'll see. But yeah, stick with it. I think we'll, how many more are there? This is going to be 17 total.
Yeah. I think there's 6 more or 5 more then.
I don't know.
Well, anyway, either way, we can continue next week with episode 10.
Episode 10, which will be called Do Not Disturb. That sounds like it'll be back in the hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see what happens. And thank you for listening.
Yep, and if you want to comment on Fear the Walking Dead Season 2 after the mid-season hiatus, send us a tweet, Reanimated PCast on the Twitters, and reanimatedpodcast.com is the website. And if you want to send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, ciao.
Adios.